Part of our celebrations of 50 years on TV, I have with me now the man who started daily current affairs in New Zealand. Paul Holmes, welcome.
Was it daily? I suppose it did.
Yes.
Kind of, I suppose.
Yes.
We did, yeah.
Well, I said you have, so welcome. And Tom Bradley's with us, a newsreader from 75 to 98. Hello, Tom, how are you?
Hello, Hadyn. I'm very well.
75 to 98, that's a good stretch for any newsreader. It's a fickle business.
That's a pretty long stretch. And I've got all the scars to show for it.
How are you, Thomas? You're looking very well, as a matter of fact.
Thank you, Paul, and so are you. You're looking resplendent down there. I love the shirt.
Thank you very much. I was speaking to someone on the phone before I came in and said, oh, you're off to do your 60 years of television. I said, not 60. He said, oh, no, that was your birthday. So.
Very good. OK, we'll start with you, Paul. The launch of the Home Show in '89. And it possibly couldn't have got off to a more controversial start. Talkback radio was hating you, the print media were just started their campaign into you, and it was all because of this. Let's have a look.
But you said at the time Bruce Farr was a loser. You said that you were sailing against a dog. You said New Zealand, the team, was full of shit. Do you think those were things that need some apology to the New Zealand people in a country, Mr. Connor, where you're going to have to spend a bit of time?
Paul, you're taking things out of context, and I respectfully reserve the right to disagree with you, and I have to run now, so I'd like to thank you very much for having me on your show. I would like to wish you luck in the future, and sure look forward to being down here with the New Zealand people and their upcoming fabulous event. Thank you very much for having me.
But would you be interested in apologising to Mr. Farr in public, Mr. Connor?
That's a real look of restraint, isn't it? He wanted to tear you a new one.
Oh, yeah, I mean, before that I'd used the word cheated. And that's, see, he thought I think it was just going to be an easy thing, and he said, how long have you been doing the show? And I said, actually, I haven't started yet, because we were pre-recording that on a Friday night, and I said, we start on Monday. I haven't done this before, and I think he didn't think it was really going to be current affairs-y interview. I'm not sure
He thought he was getting a free hit.
What he thought, but then I said, the sad thing is you won the America's Cup and then you lost it, then you won it back, but in winning it back you cheated. At the moment, at the mention of that word cheat, and I mean, I had no other questions really except about that incident with Bruce Farr that had happened some years before. And at the mention of the word cheat, I saw those, I'm sure he had blue eyes, but I swear to God they turned to steel. As Michael Fay once said, suddenly the face became the toughest face in competitive sport. And it was amazing, really. But we had no idea the fuss it was going to cause. Because
it was called the start of tabloid television, the death of television. People thought this was the beginning of the end, and you were going to be something that clearly...
Oh, the newspapers the next day, you know how newspapers, when they love to talk about graphic moments that happen on television, they'd taken, snapshots from a television screen.
Yeah.
So it was all grainy, and so the Christchurch Star particularly did this. I think it was an eruption. After the program went to air, we went back round, had some champagne in the Holmes office, and I said to Mike Valentine, well, what's tomorrow's big story? He said, you are sunshine. And it was like, but I wasn't ready for it. It was like months of, oh.
Did you ever doubt that was the way to go? Did you soften up because of the public reaction?
I think I did probably a little bit, but then I was so new to it, and really interviewing live on television, or even pre-recording interviews on television, takes ages to learn. As I'm sure you're finding out, you know, it's a whole different skill, even from radio interviewing. And it took me, I reckon, a good couple of years. But I might have softened up a bit. I mean, the debate about whether we were down market, dumbing them down, tabloid current affairs, and yet through all that time, over the subsequent 2, 3, 4, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, we were breaking story after story after story in this country. So I think what the program did really was it broadened current affairs out. I mean, my thing was that everybody had to be able to understand, everybody, brain surgeon, person with very little education, was part of the national debate about issues. Those were our people today, right? And so everybody had to be able to understand everything we did. So even if you're discussing superannuation with the finance minister, you had to do it in such a way that it was, A, interesting, sexy, and by that I mean brings people in, but it had to be comprehensible, you know?
Tom, what did you make of when Paul first started? Because you were in the newsroom, of course, you were across the newsroom. What did you make of this upstart changing television?
Oh, we were all a bit shocked, because, of course, it was a whole new approach to disseminating information. You must remember that leading up to that time, news conferences prior to a bulletin would frequently be what's the lead story out of the Beehive today? What is Muldoon or whoever said? That would be the lead story. Whatever was happening in Wellington politically was the lead story. That was it, no matter how dry, no matter how boring, and we would do it in a very we just do it in a very straight way. And of course, Paul was able to come along and, you know, give it a bit of razzmatazz, make it understandable. I think he made a good point there. It was making it understandable, entertaining, making people want to watch, and feeding them the information that they really needed to know in a much more entertaining way. And he did it brilliantly, and still does.
Now, Tom Bradley started in 1976. Let's have a quick look at him as a couple of years later. This is in 1979.
And this year's budget will be presented on Thursday, June the 21st, a little over a fortnight away. The Prime Minister says all budget decisions have been made and can be brought together in print by then.
Tom, does that feel like yesterday?
I love the voice.
Well,
Yes,
that was part of it, Tom. You had to speak like Dougal Stevenson, you know what I mean?
You had to speak like Dougal Stevenson. He did not look like him, thankfully, but I had to speak like him. That was a hangover from my sort of radio training and things like that, where they expected you to be very sort of received English pronunciation and style and all the rest of it. But I loved the outfits back then, because that was a time when we had chroma keys, we had, you know, images behind us, but I forget what the colour was, but whatever it was, we couldn't wear grey. We could not wear grey. So I had a mustard jacket and I had a brown jacket, and I used to just wear them sort of day about, and I just couldn't wear grey, I couldn't wear anything remotely bluish, and wardrobes tended to be very dull.
And you started on TV too, because TV1 and TV News had separate news services back in the day.
They did. It was wonderful. For a very few months when they first started, suddenly there was a new kid on the block. We were new, we were aggressive. TV1 continued to do what they did very well, and we came in and said, right, let's go out there and let's do the stories they're doing. Let's do them better. Let's do them faster. Let's do them in a brighter way. And suddenly there was competition. But of course, Rob Muldoon, the Prime Minister at the time, hated the idea of turning up somewhere and finding there were two news crews there and two reporters asking him the same questions. So he said, I'll fix these guys. And he sort of, I won't try and do a Rob Muldoon impersonation, but he started to put everything back together again. So within a matter of months, we started to lose a bit of that. But for a few heady months, it was absolutely wonderful. And I'm so pleased to have been part of that.
But of course, Tom, then came another channel, and TV3 finally got on the air. And I can remember being in the you know, TVNZ newsroom that day, and I know that Julie and Richard, you know, were very mindful that a new channel was starting up that night, and Julian Mount had come down to see me on the Friday and said, how do you think they're going to go? And, you know, we were on full alert that night, up at our peak performance, best performances, and but that really gave us a, you know, good push along as well. It was great to have opposition. I mean, I think it was absurd having TVNZ having two newsrooms, probably looking back. Muldoon was probably right. You know, in that particular one instance.
Did you say that, Muldoon?
Yeah, I did.
No,
in that one instant.
It would have worked had we been given a longer period to do it. And I think there would have been more of a breakup of the two organisations, so we would have got to a truly competitive situation. But you're right, TV3 coming along was one of the best things ever to happen to broadcasting. It did suddenly put everyone on their best performance, best game, because you knew the next day people would be saying, TV3 did that story and they did it a lot better. And editors would sit around at conferences and say, how can we do it better tonight? How can we actually be there first? So it was just competitive, both in a sprint and both trying to win the prize.
So the winner overall was The Viewer. We must move along, but you haven't always been strictly a current affairs host. You've been a...
No, I know you've dragged up some ghastly things, which I can't stand. How are you, Sarah?
An actor. Let's have a look at this clip.
Well, it's him or us. You don't want to be ground under the capitalist jackboot.
But wouldn't the Rent Tribunal help?
The Rent Tribunal?
Not so long ago.
You see, I just hate that stuff, you know. The next Buckhouse series was the funny one, I think. I'm not sure our one was particularly... The first one was... I'd had a bad car accident about a year before, and I could be funny, but I don't think I was particularly funny in that series. But the hair looks ghastly, doesn't it?
Let's move along.
Right.
There were many bloopers that didn't always... Oh, there's the hair there. Oh, can we go and have a quick look at the hair again? Sorry. Oh, yeah. That's
the
all
moustache.
right.
I thought the moustache was great.
Yeah. You'd go well in November, Paul.
OK, let's move on. I know you've got time. I know you've got time issues.
Let's have a look at some bloopers from back in the day, because it didn't always go to plan. Let's have a look.
Blood-stained, and they're carrying out tests on it. And that's the Network News Hour.
What? Hey. Philip, no. Oh, where is he? Tape VTA. No, keep rolling. Oh, damn. Jimmy. Sorry, Wellington. Our reader forgot he had another story.
Another story to do.
Coming up, Schneider enters the eternal triangles.
That still happens today on this show quite often. Tom, do you have many technical malfunctions?
Oh, yes, and if in doubt, blame the reader. Blame the reader.
I
That's
know.
always the
Did
way
you notice
the way
that?
it
Our
has
reader.
been.
He was only Philip Sherry. Our reader, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Philip was wonderful at that. But, I mean, it happened to everybody. I remember reading a late news bulletin one night. The editor, or the director before the show had said, you know, drop stories 10, 11 and 17 or whatever. I screwed them up and threw them aside. Came to the end of the bulletin, I said, and it's good night for us or whatever. And he said, hang on, in my ear, where's story 17? And I thought, oh, he said, read it off the, we haven't got it in the prompt, read it off the paper. And I had to say to the people, excuse me a moment, and I kind of stretched out a shot and found the paper, and I was saying, I've had a very long day. Have you had a long day? It's 11:30 at night, so if you excuse me, I'll just flatten out this paper. And then I said, right, now here is our final story, and, you know, a singing dog in Dunedin or something like that. But, I mean, you just had to sort of go with the flow. And when it was live, it was live. And I loved live TV like today because you don't get a chance to do take two.
No, that's dead right. And because I think when things... I loved it when things went wrong because there's a chance for me to break out of the square.
Yes.
You were talking about your first instinct then in those days, Tom, being to lean off screen so no one could see you having this conversation. These days, I just have the conversation down the barrel with the control room. I don't think it really matters.
You had to talk through a commercial break. The commercials went down, so you had to fill for, was it three or 4 minutes?
Yes, there was something like that happen. Stories went down, I think. 2 stories went down in a row, and I had to kind of just keep talking. I don't think that was my greatest night at it, but when little things go wrong, as they do, you might go to the wrong camera. Oops, go over to this camera, whatever. The public don't mind this because people at home know they're watching television and it's not coming straight down from heaven, you know. There are men and women working behind cameras. It's human. And, you know, people... Guyan says to me, he calls it lifting the curtain. Lifting the curtain. And I don't think people mind that.
We're going to run, but let's have a look at one more clip just before we go. I rather enjoyed this.
It's a bit of a bun doer.
What's that? What's a bun doer?
You do your scone a bit. You could do a tantrum or two. What would make...
There's been questions around the studio about whether there was tongue involved.
No tongue. No lips actually touched.
We've got to run, but just before you go, Tom, do you wish to be back in the seat? Do you have any longing to be back there today?
No. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, writing children's books, and if I can be crassly commercial, I can just briefly tell you about Troublesome Jones, my latest children's novel, which has been published here in Australia and Canada, and hopefully the world will follow. So I'm having a very happy time continuing to do what I've done for the last almost 20 years, writing children's books, and that appeals to the child in me. So the body will grow old and weary, but the child inside will never die.
Still get stopped at the supermarket?
Yes, by old ladies with grey hair. I'm very big with the pink rinse set. I'm very big with that set.
Who were once 30, Tom.
Who were once 30, as we were, Paul, as we were.
Thank you very much,
And of course, I'm very busy with the Paul Holmes Extraversion Olive Oil
and
the very fine Q&A program on Sunday morning.
Sarah.
Oh, my goodness, shameless, but wonderful. Really interesting to hear that Tom is a novelist. Thank you very much, both of you.